It is official. The SEC has adopted a 9-game conference schedule in 2026. What does that mean for the Aggies? And what does that mean for the SEC in general?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are Locked On the Texas A&M Aggies. I am your host, Matt Galatzan, publisher of Texas A&M Aggies on SI. Thank you for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. Today, I am joined by my colleague over on Texas A&M Aggies on SI, Zach Dimmitt. Zach, the SEC is going to a 9-game conference schedule. They got the Big Ten got what they wanted, except I don't think that it's really going to help out the Big Ten as much as they think it's going to help out the Big Ten.
Right. Yeah, it's really refreshing to see this, just because A&M and a lot of the other teams in the conference haven't been able to play each other on a consistent basis over the years since A&M got into the SEC. So this is going to be nice to see A&M eventually be able to play a team like Georgia, Tennessee. Teams like that. So, they've already been playing, some big boys in the past, LSU, Alabama, those kind of teams. So this is really nice. But, also, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, you got to hope that A&M is going to get those 3 rivalry games locked in as well, which we all kind of expect. So we'll talk about that here in a second. But yeah, this is just a great move by the SEC. Obviously, Greg Sankey, the SEC, they're going to, as they should, they're going to talk highly of themselves and, talk about how competitive the schedule should be year in and year out, and it should be. And so this is nice to see that, there's not going to be as many potential FBS opponents on the schedule for some of these teams, and we're really going to have or FCS, I should say, a really competitive, schedule year in and year out for a lot of these SEC teams.
Yeah, and let's talk about what this means for Texas A&M first. We'll get to the 3-game or the 3-team, rivalry, protected rivalry in the next segment. But let's talk about what the 9-game schedule itself means for Texas A&M first. On the face, it kind of seems like it's going to make it a hell of a lot more difficult to make the college football playoff. But when you consider the fact that the college football playoff is now ranking strength of schedule significantly more in terms of a credential to get into the college football playoff, I think that this provides Texas A&M and the SEC both at the same time a better opportunity to make a case to get into the college football playoff, number one, because a 10-2 Indiana like last year or a 10-2 Illinois potentially this year, there's no way in hell they're getting into the college football playoff over a 9-3 SEC team, especially considering that strength of schedule. And one of these new rules under the new format that you mentioned was that each team's remaining 6 games will rotate among the remaining conference schools, and each team will face every other SEC program at least once every 2 years, and every opponent at home and away in 4 years. So that means you're going to see every team in the SEC come through College Station over the next 4 years. And that is awesome. We have never seen Georgia in College Station. We have never seen a lot of these other teams in College Station either. There's going to be some new ones this year. It's really ridiculous, the fact that the Georgia Bulldogs have never visited College Station in the SEC, and the Aggies have been in the SEC since 2011.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and you just know that it'd be great theater to see those kind of opponents like Georgia come to College Station. Just think about some of the finishes that A&M's had against Alabama in years past, especially the upset. I think it was 2021 at Kyle Field, and just amazing scenes. And so it's not gonna be an upset victory or a win over these powerhouses every single time for A&M, but you just know this is gonna make some great theater over the coming years. And you already have, the renewed rivalry with Texas on top of that. So, this is going to be awesome. And, it's going to be a little bit refreshing. Like, I know A&M plays Samford second to last game of the season. Maybe that kind of game gets knocked out because that doesn't really help A&M in any way. And you add a power opponent whether that be non-con or a new SEC team, obviously, in place of a team like Samford, for example. That'll just really boost A&M's strength of schedule. And any sort of argument they may have with another team in contention to get into the CFP, that'll help A&M, potentially be vaulted above that team in that scenario. So, just great move all around by the SEC, and it was kind of one you could see coming just based off the way things were going.
Yeah, and I think that my favorite part of this is that like the week before rivalry week, we're probably no longer going to get those A&M Samford, Alabama versus ULM, Auburn versus, Appalachian State, whatever those matchups were in the past and whatever they're going to be this year, that is going away. I hate that week of college football because you're really gearing up for the SEC championship, and then you get this dud of a weekend, and it sucks, and I hate it. That is going away. That is my favorite part about this. And also, this is kind of my last point about how this affects Texas A&M recruiting. If you're going to be traveling to every SEC program over the next 4 years, every SEC opponent over the next 4 years, that means you get to go back to Florida. That means you get to go into Georgia. That means you get to go into Tennessee. That means you get to go into South Carolina. That means you get to go, you get Oklahoma too. I mean, there's a lot of fertile recruiting grounds. I mean, Oklahoma not so much necessarily, but you also get that that old Big 12 rivalry back a little bit too, which will be a lot of fun. But getting to go into these states more often and kind of pitch your recruiting a little bit and say, hey, we came to your state, we beat the Georgia Bulldogs, we beat the Florida Gators, whatever the case may be. I think that's going to be huge.
Right. Yeah. I just think of Miami playing Florida week 1 last season. Miami pulls off the big win in the Swamp, and all the Miami players are going up to the end zone, talking to the recruits, saying, "Come to Miami." That needs to be A&M if they get some of these big time wins in the upcoming seasons. Obviously that's minimal impact in the long run. Players coming up to other recruits, but you never know. One player, 2 players changing their mind based on the outcome of a game. You just never know how these guys are thinking. It could make all the difference in the world. And so, I love this for A&M and for all the SEC teams, because it's not only great for A&M's chances at a potential CFP berth in the upcoming years, but it's also great from a fan perspective just to see all this turn out the way it has.
Yeah, and the one last thing we're going to talk about here before we move on to the protected rivals conversation, and we're going to mention it real quick. By getting rid of that 4th non-conference game, there's also a new rule that's going to be in place that you have to schedule a quality non-conference opponent. That means a Power 4 opponent. Luckily, Texas A&M already has those locked down for the next couple of years. They have Arizona State in 26 and 27. They have Louisville in 28, 29. So those are locked down, and A&M will have a quality Power 4 opponent plus 9 SEC games. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be tough. All the things you can think about that could go wrong probably could go wrong, but it could also help A&M, things go right for Texas A&M in the future. All right, let's change gears. We're going to take our first break real quick, and then we are going to talk about the protected rival conversation, because there's now 3 protected rivals for every school in the SEC going forward. And I think we probably already know who Texas A&M, a couple of Texas A&M should be, but we'll talk about that next year on Locked On Aggies. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a bright new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. Whether you're calling for your MVP, a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champion before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So take the flyer in the MVP race. I'm taking Josh Allen. I think it's his year to do it. Crown your champion in August. I have a really hard time believing that if Josh Allen wins the MVP and the Bills are the best team in the NFL, that they're not going to win the Super Bowl. But the Eagles are always going to be there, so I'm going to be flopping between the 2 of them. Or you can parlay your division winner dark horses. Maybe the Cowboys finally get another NFC East championship. Maybe the Falcons shock the world and win the NFC South. You never know what might happen. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. All right, Zach. So 9-game SEC schedule. This means that, things are going to get a lot more difficult for A&M in the future. And one of the rules that comes along with it is that you will now have 3 protected rivals in the SEC. I think we all know who Texas A&M's first rivalry will be protected, and that is the Texas Longhorns. It's one of the best rivalries in college football. It's a historic rivalry. We don't even have to talk about that one. That one is going to be locked down forever and from now on until the end of time. Thank God, because it's one of the best games in the world. Another one that I think is probably a lock is Arkansas. You do you have the Southwest the Southwest Classic pretty much every year since A&M has been in the conference over the last 14 or so years, and A&M is, let me look at my notes real quick. A&M has won 12 of the last 13 games in this rivalry, but 8 of those 13 games have been decided by 10 points or less. And it has just become a great overall rivalry. Now it's going to be home and home, which I think makes it even better as opposed to being in AT&T Stadium. This year, it's I believe A&M has Arkansas. Is it in? I can't remember. Is it in Fayetteville or is it in College
Station? It's in
Station?
Fayetteville.
Yeah, so it's in Fayetteville. So that's gonna be great. I think that we can both agree that that's going to be 2 of A&M's 3 protected rivals. The question is, who is the third? And for my money, and I think every A&M fan would agree with me on this one, they would like it to be LSU. That is a game that it's 4-4 in the last 8, so it's been very competitive. And since joining the SEC, this has been A&M's Thanksgiving rivalry matchup in 11 of the last 14 years. Obviously, that's going to go to the Texas game now. But I think that we can move this game to October and make it a great midseason rivalry and a great midseason test every single year for Texas A&M. And I think that's the direction they should go. I don't know if you have a different pick, but LSU is certainly mine.
No, I'm with you there with LSU. A lot of these other SEC teams, it's pretty locked in who their 3 rivals would be. But yeah, for A&M, it's up for debate a little bit on that third one. And LSU is kind of interesting because there's not like a lot of history, dating back to like the 1800s or anything like that with some of these rivalries. But just so much recent history, so many memorable games. Of course, who could forget, 74-72, I believe was the final score back in that, million overtime game, just things like that. A&M upsetting Jaden Daniels and LSU when they were already, out of bowl contention a few years back, some memorable finishes. So I don't think there's any question that LSU should be the third one. You can maybe make a debate for, South Carolina, Florida, but those don't really, get the juices flowing when you think about those being rivalry games. But LSU, I think, is perfect. They're already going to Death Valley this upcoming season, A&M is, and so being able to continue that year in and year out, you don't want to see 2 years or so without them playing each other. So. I think that's the best possible choice. Like I said, other SEC teams have 3 teams that, okay, we know these are our rivals. A&M's kind of in a different situation a little bit. Oklahoma, not really a rival. They have Big 12 history, but not necessarily historical rivals, in my opinion. So I think, for the sake of this, LSU is the best choice. And I think that's going to be great for A&M, great for LSU. Both of those teams, obviously, Louisiana and Texas are going to be kind of competing against each other with recruiting. And so I like that pick, and it's going to be refreshing to see that be the choice once we finally get to see who these 3 rivals are.
Yeah, and I talked about this yesterday with DJ when this was just kind of a proposed thing. And then, of course, after our show, it officially went, this is what's going to happen, which is great timing, by the way. Thank you, Ross Dellinger. Thank you, ESPN, for announcing that as soon as our show stopped recording. But we talked about South Carolina because there's technically a rivalry trophy in that. And South Carolina is one of the few teams in the SEC that doesn't really have a natural rival. Their big rival is obviously Clemson. And it's kind of hard to imagine who their other rivals would be. There's a couple of other teams in the SEC who have this issue. Vanderbilt really only has Tennessee. Outside of that, it's kind of dicey. Missouri has Arkansas. Outside of that, it's also kind of dicey. But for the most part, it's pretty easy to figure out who the three rivals are going to be for most of these teams, like you said. I think for Arkansas, it's Missouri and Texas and Ole Miss. I think Auburn is Alabama, obviously. Georgia, obviously. Florida, they have Georgia, but there's a lot. There's a lot of rivalries that could continue forward in this that I'm very interested in as well. Like LSU Alabama isn't technically a rivalry in terms of like a trophy or anything like that, but I think it's one of the best rivalries that has developed over the last 15, 20 years since Nick Saban left LSU and then went to Alabama. And they're obviously going to have Ole Miss. We think they should have Texas A&M. So there's a lot of interesting, potential rivalries that could develop because of this. I mean, Oklahoma and Missouri, former Big 8 and Big 12 opponents. I think that would be a great one. You look at Texas, I think that's pretty locked down for them. Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Arkansas is pretty easy. You look at Georgia, Florida, Auburn. You could potentially put Alabama in that category for them. But I think that Alabama is probably going to be locked in with Tennessee and LSU. So there's a lot of interesting scenarios that could come about from this, and I'm pretty excited to see how it develops going forward into the future.
Yeah, the thing about a lot of these historical conference realignments for some of these teams is that a lot of these historical rivals, don't really get to play each other as much in conference. Obviously, like Missouri and Kansas will play this year. They're very heated rivals. It gets kind of overlooked a little bit, but that's just one example. You don't really think about it, and so there's it's kind of tough for some of these teams to decide, okay, who's our in-conference rival? And that's a good point about South Carolina with A&M. That's probably maybe the most overlooked rivalry trophy in my opinion, because I honestly didn't really know much about that at all, to be honest, that being a trophy in that rivalry. So that's pretty crazy to think.
There's a reason for that. It's because apparently DJ told me yesterday, I didn't know this. There's a trophy, but nobody's seen it in like 10 years. It got lost somehow. So it's been lost in the ether and it's somewhere out there, but apparently it exists. I had no idea about that. I should probably have known that since we've been covering A&M for the last 5 years, but hey, you learn something new every day, right?
Right. And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and some of these SEC teams, they already have their Power Four matchup pretty much locked up forever, because like Georgia plays Georgia Tech every year. South Carolina plays Florida every year. Florida plays Florida State every year. Kentucky plays Louisville every year. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how some of these other ones shake out for sure.
Yeah, and just, based off the way A&M and South Carolina have played each other recently, I think that could be one that wouldn't be too surprising to see the SEC go with, just because LSU maybe has an argument for a few more rivals that could maybe knock A&M out of that third spot. We'll see how it goes, but it's going to be interesting to see for A&M's perspective, just because, like we said, a lot of these teams already know who their rivals are going to be. And so that adds a little bit of intrigue into the future about, what could come with that. And, even if South Carolina isn't, or LSU isn't one of the rivals, they're still going to be able to play A&M, obviously, with the new conference, change to the schedule. So it's not going to be the end of the world. It's not like these teams are never going to see each other. But it's just that annual rivalry that's going to, really be interesting to see how that goes. But hey, at least Texas and A&M are playing each other again. At least we have that. Now we just got to figure out the rest of it.
Yeah, and just to update the South Carolina rivalry trophy thing, it's apparently called the Bonham Trophy, and it is awarded to the winner of the Texas A&M South Carolina, the winner of that game. And apparently it's been lost for years. And nobody knows what happened to it. Nobody knows where it is. There's a picture of it on Instagram from George P. Bush, and back in when was this? It was years ago. We wrote a story about it on Texas A&M Aggies on SI back in 2021 when we first started writing there, and it's very interesting. Everybody should go check it out. But it's very interesting that this thing has just kind of disappeared, and it's certainly something that is worth investigating. I think if you're a South Carolina athletic director, or if you're the Texas A&M athletic director, but we'll see what happens. I still think it should be LSU as the third one. We'll see where it goes. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're gonna kind of change gears a little bit. We're gonna talk about Johnny Manziel being snubbed in a greatest college football players of the century list. He didn't make it, guys. Johnny Football. Let's talk about it next. Today's episode is brought to you by Rougiette. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike usual pills that can take hours, Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average, in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rougiette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to rougiette.com/lockedoncollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That's rougiette.com/lockedoncollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information. All right, Zach, we're going to talk some Johnny Manziel, and this is just criminal. You know, I don't know how this happened. I don't know what the reasoning behind leaving someone who I consider to be a top 5 quarterback in college football history, maybe at least top 10, off of the 25 best college football players of the century list released by Bleacher Report today. There's a lot of players that were left off because you can only have 25 players over the last 25 years.
Right.
So there's a lot of good players that are going to be left off. And somehow Johnny Manziel was one of them. But before we get into the other quarterbacks that made the list ahead of him, some of the other players that were left off of this list include Adrian Peterson, Chase Young, Darren McFadden, also criminal in my opinion, Derrick Henry, James Laurinaitis, Justin Blackman from Oklahoma State, Kellen Moore, Marcus Mariota, Sean Taylor, also criminal, Tyrann Mathieu from LSU, and Will Anderson out of Alabama. Let me tell you the quarterbacks that made the list above Johnny Manziel, and that's kind of where we'll start talking about this. You go on down the list, and the first quarterback you find is Deshaun Watson. National championship winner, Heisman winner. I think he won a Heisman. I may be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure. Oh no, he
did not.
He had two top 3 Heisman finishes. Sorry. So Deshaun Watson, Andrew Luck. Keep going on down the list here a little bit. Matt Leinart. A few players here. Blah 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 blah. Travis Hunter made the list. Ridiculous. Lamar Jackson is on the list at 11. Baker Mayfield at 9. I think that's my biggest issue here, putting him above Johnny Football, but that's another debate, I guess. Joe Burrow, I'm fine with. Vince Young, I'm fine with. 2 more. Cam Newton, I'm fine with. And then Tim Tebow, I'm fine with. So really the debate is, should Johnny Manziel be in there above Matt Leinart, above Baker Mayfield, above Lamar Jackson, Andrew Luck, or Deshaun Watson? I think he should be at least in above a couple of those guys. I'm not prepared to put him above necessarily Matt Leinart. He's a Heisman winner and a national title winner. I put him in above Deshaun Watson. I put him in above Andrew Luck. I put him in above Baker Mayfield. I know a lot of people think Baker Mayfield is one of the best ever. But the guy never won a national title. He has a Heisman. Johnny has a Heisman. And I think Johnny was a much more exciting, much more game-breaking player and because of everything that he could do with his legs and with his arm and all the different stuff. Whatever the case, if you want to put him in above another positional player, Travis Hunter shouldn't be on this list. He just shouldn't. I get it. Like, he won a Heisman, but there's some players on this list, like Khalil Mack at Buffalo. I get he was a great NFL player. You can't put a guy at Buffalo ahead of Johnny freaking football. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, we didn't even really talk about this before the show, but I was already thinking to myself, Travis Hunter, maybe deserves to be on the list, but certainly not above Manziel at all. But there's a ton of recency bias there, in my opinion, from Bleacher Report. Of course, Travis Hunter is a talented player, otherworldly when it comes to his ability. But, if you compare his Heisman season to Johnny Football's, it's not even close, in my opinion. Plus, Colorado never contended for anything at all. They're just – it's obviously very difficult to play both sides of the football, but they're just factoring that in way too hard, in my opinion. And the fact that Manziel won the Heisman as a freshman, and then he's had a top 5 finish for the award again the following 1 year, you could even argue that his stats were as good, if not better, during his sophomore season. Of course, A&M didn't make it to the national title game. That's definitely something, they didn't win a national title. That's something that you have to factor in as well with a lot of these players. But even someone like Michael Crabtree, an amazing receiver, one of the best in recent memory. But, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, having him above Johnny Football. So Khalil Mack is another one that I didn't even think about. That's a little bit ridiculous, in my opinion. So, but, if you want a Heisman, that should immediately put you into that top 25, or, in my opinion, having someone like Marcus Mariota as well off that list, a little bit surprising to me. Won a Heisman, took Oregon to the national title game. They lost to Ohio State. But yeah, it's just that I'm reading through this, and Bleacher Report doesn't exactly say what the credentials are. And so you wonder what their thinking is there, because a Heisman Trophy is arguably the most prestigious individual award you can win in all of sports. So are we going to are we going to factor that in or not? I just don't get it. It's like we factored in with Travis Hunter, but we're not factoring it in with Johnny Manziel. So it just doesn't really make any sense to me, especially because Travis Hunter and Colorado didn't contend for anything at all. So there's no argument there. Some decent picks on this list. I'm not saying that Manziel needs to be above Liner, Vince Young, Cam Newton. Definitely not. But you just look at the bottom of that list, and there's no way he shouldn't be at least in that top 25. You have an argument, maybe someone like Deshaun Watson winning 2 national titles. That's obviously a major deal. Some players don't even win 1. He was able to do 2. So, a lot of things wrong with this list. A lot of things that I do agree with, but having Manziel off that, when you look at some of the players that made it above him, is just a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah, and look, the top 5 quarterbacks in college football history are Vince Young, Tim Tebow, Cam Newton, Johnny Manziel, and then Baker Mayfield, in my opinion. And if you look at it that way, he should be in above at least Deshaun Watson, in my opinion. 2 national championships are great. I'm not saying that's, I'm not saying that should be the deciding factor. It's a phenomenal accomplishment, but winning a Heisman Trophy as a freshman is the most impressive thing that I have ever seen in college football history. And they were 11-2 that season, and they were competing in the SEC in their very first season. And Colorado never came close to that. Stanford never came close to competing the way that the Texas A&M did that year. So Andrew Luck, great quarterback, maybe the best prospect of all time, but Johnny should be somewhere. I don't care if it's 25. He should be somewhere, Bleacher Report. You got it wrong. But that's going to do it for another episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank you for making Locked On Aggies your first listen today. For your second listen, please check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors and portal entries and signings. You can be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal Show on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, give me a follow over on X at Matt Galatzan, and give Zach a follow at Zach Dimmitt 7 with 2 M's and 2 T's. Follow us both on Texas A&M Aggies on SI, and we will see you next time.